Hey you guys, welcome back. I wanted to do another video. This time I wanted to take you guys on the journey of building a lithium ion battery pack, a custom battery pack. And wanted to make an announcement as well. I just got a crap ton of these batteries. So a couple boxes. These are NCR 18650B batteries. And I got a couple of those boxes, and that was only possible because of you guys, actually. I was quite content with the last project that I did, and I wasn't going to do anything for a while. But because of the generous donations from you guys, and one person in particular, you know who you are, you donated enough to actually pretty much just buy the batteries for me, and you've basically given me absolutely no excuse now not to make that next project, which is a Kodiak generator, a 1 kilowatt battery pack. So that is in the works. I have ordered all the parts for that. I'm waiting for those to arrive from AliExpress. As you know, it takes a while, about a month for that stuff to come from China. But as soon as I get all that, I'm going to let you guys in on the new build for the Kodiak, and we'll see how we do with that. I'll also take you on the path to designing and building that from beginning to end, in the sense that you and we're going to discuss what you need to think about in terms of planning before you even get to the building part of something like that, right? So there's a lot of considerations, a lot of things that you have to think about before you even start to order parts, right? Because otherwise you're just going to be spending a bunch of money. Parts are going to arrive, and you're going to realize that potentially you order things that you don't need, or you ordered the wrong things. So I'll take you on the journey of how I plan something like that, and we'll build that from beginning to end. So the next thing that I want to do, this video here, because I have so many of these batteries now, and I have enough to build a second battery, a smaller battery. It's wintertime here in Canada, and I like to go ice fishing, and I recently bought this as a Merry Christmas to me kind of present. And this is a fishing sonar. It's a Humminbird Helix 5, and for anybody that's into ice fishing, seen one of those before, you know that they come with these dreadful, heavy, shitty what is this, lead acid batteries, right? So this is a sealed lead acid battery. It's 12 volts and 7.2 amp hours, which is crap, because about half of that is usable. So maybe you get 3 amp hours out of it before you start to really do damage to the battery. And it's heavy, right? So of course somebody in my building has to be doing construction during this video. Thanks a lot. Yeah, so I typically walk out on the ice. I don't have a snowmobile or anything. So I want it to be lighter, and I want it to have more runtime. I want to be able to take this out on a weekend, and if I'm doing a sleepover trip or something, have power for the whole weekend and not have to worry about it. So we are going to build this to replace this. And this is going to be, you know what, I'll recheck my math, but I think the last time I calculated it, it's about 23 amp hours. 90% of it is usable. You can use 100% of it and you still get a very long life out of this battery, but 90% of it, if you use 90% of that 23 amp hours, is very much usable, and it's going to allow this thing to go for thousands of cycles. So discharged, fully charged and discharged for thousands of times, whereas this thing, you take it down below 50% just a handful of times, and you've already detrimentally damage this thing to the point where you're lucky if you get 50 cycles out of it, okay? So weight difference between these two, this feels like probably half of this, and it's got about 3 times the energy density of that, and much more of it is usable. So that's what we're gonna build in this video, and I'll take you through the steps of actually building it from beginning to end. All right? So we're trying to build a 12 volt battery with 18650s. You'll see here, I've saved you the trouble of watching me put together these cell holders, but we're just using these 18650 cell holders. You arrange them in the size of the battery that you want. I arranged it in the sense that it's going to have the same footprint as this battery, right? You see that? So it's going to fit in the same slot, and using the cell holders is perfect spacing really to mimic that form factor, right? So we want a 12 volt battery. Each of these cells is each of these individual cells is 3.7 volts nominal, 4.2 volts fully charged, right? So the nominal is the midpoint. We want them to be in a string of 3, so 4.2 times 3 is going to give you 12.6 volts. And we also want to have a bunch of them in parallel to increase the amp hour capacity of the battery, right? So I prefer to have my cells individually in a straight line, the ones that are going to be in parallel, and then they're going to be series connected to the adjacent cells so that you get increased voltage, right? So 3.7 plus 3.7 plus 3.7, that's going to give you 11.1 nominal, 12.6 fully charged, right? So with that said, let's get started with the design part. I'm not going to take you through like real-time footage of me doing everything. I'm going to try something different this time. I have another camera. We'll do a time lapse so that you can watch me as I'm building that, and you can speed up the process, but basically you'll see how it's done. And then for the long, tedious parts, you don't have to watch that thing from beginning to end, right? Because it just makes for a really long, boring video. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is just kind of measure out some of this brass strip, and we'll cut some strips. Okay. This piece has a little bit of solder on it, but that's fine. Okay, so you see here, let's get a pen. All of these here are arranged in positive facing the top. These are all negative facing the top, and these are all positive again, okay? So this is going to be our positive point, all right? So to make it series, you have positive to negative to positive to negative. So that means these two have to be connected together, okay? So we'll put a strip across here to negative to positive to negative. So this is going to be our negative side of the battery. This is going to be our positive side of the battery when we're completed and it's all together, right? So positive to negative to positive to negative to positive to negative. Hope you get that. And on top here, we'll be joining the other connection here, right? So these two are joined and these two are joined. Okay, so we'll use a little bit of hot glue. So again, these two have to be joined, those two have to be joined. We'll start with this strip here. Don't need a whole lot. Okay, let's put that upside down for a moment. And we'll do this strip here. Okay, so eventually, the cell fuses are going to hold this in place. So you don't need a ton of glue on here, because really that's just physically securing it now while we're getting things set up. But eventually you're going to have wire in between connected to this cell and that cell, and soldered onto the brass strip in between, so that's going to hold things in place. But we'll leave a little bit of slack in the fuse wire so that we don't have too much strain on it, and we leave some expansion room for for changes in heating, right? Because I am going to use this for ice fishing, so it will be getting cold, very, very cold, and warming up again. So we want some room there for expansion and not stress the wires, right? So that side is connected. Well, that side is on. This side is on. And now let's get to doing some of that fuse wire. Okay, so I've powered on the Molectrix spot welder. I've connected my battery. Just real quick, this is a 5,000 milliamp hour 3S battery, so it's 11.1 volts nominal, and it has a 50C rating. So what that 50C rating means is that it can do 50 times 5 amps. Okay, so that you can get a couple hundred amps out of this, and you can go up to 100C for this for bursts. Okay, so that's pretty much what we need for this spot welder. Okay, so with that said, let's get cooking. I'm using a 6 millisecond pulse because I did do some testing and I found that this 5 amp fuse wire works best if I use a 6 millisecond pulse. It doesn't melt the wire too much and it gets a nice good solder joint on there. A good joint on there. And so what I'm going to be doing is kind of cumbersome. Okay, so first okay, so we got the point there. One point is making contact with the cell fuse and the other side is making contact with the battery. Okay, so we have a nice strong joint there. I'll do 2. Okay, good. So we're going to have it go across here, and again, I'll leave a little bit of slack. It's kind of tedious to hold that very thin fuse wire with such a sharp tip. There you go. And we'll make another contact point there. So you guys might be asking, why am I not connecting the 2 probes straight across that wire? And that means basically it's because you're going to put the full current through such a thin wire, right? So I only really need that power to come through one end of it. The other end is making contact with the top of the cell. So basically the power comes out through the cell casing and that wire, and it fuses together, right? We don't need to do it to both ends, because then if you try to put all that current through here, you're gonna burn up the wire, and that's not what we want, right? So for this connection here, so you can see that's on there, right? I can't move this. Now the theory is that we're going to solder this here. I'm not going to try to fuse it to the brass strip with the spot welder, because I find that the brass strip is very thick and it doesn't, the power that I have to use to get it on there, it kind of burns up the wire because it's so thin, right? So we can just solder onto that. It's not going to harm the cells in any way. The cells don't feel any of that heat, right? So we're only concerned about the cells when we're applying heat to it. So that is where I will be doing the spot welding. So from this point forward, we'll do some time lapse, and you can see the rest of these cells as I do those, okay? All right, guys, so we got all the cell fusing done. You see each one of these has the cell fuses there. So the only thing left to do now is just to solder these points, and effectively what we've created is now all of these cells will be in parallel and connected in series to the following cell, right? Same thing, all of these are in parallel, connected in series here, right? So let's go ahead and do those solder connections, and we'll do a few in real time and then the rest in time lapse. Okay, so let's solder these on. I'm going to use a tiny little bit of flux on these joints just to make sure they mate well. Don't technically need to do that since there is flux in the core of the solder, but I find it makes for a better joint anyway. Okay, let's get a little solder on there. All right. Just clean that up. Okay, so we do have a little bit of glue that came out there. Obviously you're making this hot and there's glue underneath, hot glue underneath, but we have some good joints there, okay? Actually that was quick enough that I don't really need to do that in time lapse, so we'll do the other side. Get the tip wet. Okay, so that's done. Obviously, when you're soldering, you should not be inhaling those fumes. Perhaps in a future project, I'll make a vent hood or something, because I do tend to solder a lot. Just clean that up. Okay, so we're done now. You know what? I just realized I'm getting ahead of myself here, and there's a step I completely skipped. So we're gonna need a couple more of these, and that is for the end connections, right? So what I was doing here was the series connections, putting these cells in parallel, but these need to be in parallel as well. So put another strip here, and another strip here. Okay, so let's do that now. Okay, and give me a second and let me just warm up the hot glue. Okay, so let's put a bit of hot glue on here and do that. So we're going to do the positive side. Okay, and we'll do the negative side as well. Alright, so that's secured in place. And let's do some more spot welding. Okay, so what I think I'll do is I'll spot weld first and then we'll solder last. This is all soldered in place. We can get this out of the way. Let's get the solder iron heated up. Okay. Get a little bit of flux. Okay, we're just going to do the same thing. We're just going to put a little flux on the ends here. Don't need a lot. Okay. Okay, let's do the other side. Okay, so now that that's done, we can get our battery meter. And where are we? So that's our negative, that's our positive, right? So anywhere on this rail is going to be positive. Anywhere on this rail is going to be negative. It's going to give me the same voltage. And you can see the 11.32 volts. So that's good. Now the pack is technically done, right? So from this point, all we have to really do is put on some leads. So we can connect a lead to here, positive lead to here, and you can call it a day and you'd be done, right? But we're working with 18650 lithium ion batteries, right? And I've talked about safety at length in my previous videos, right? And we're not going to call it done. So at this point in time, really you need to put in some sort of battery management system to be sure that this thing is safe. And right now, you know, I built this, I know what its capabilities are, I know what the minimum and the maximum is, but there's no guarantee that somebody's not going to pick this up and try to charge it, not knowing anything about it, and try to charge it with, a lead acid battery charger or something stupid like that, right? So with that being said, what the BMS's job is to make sure that this battery pack never sees more than 12.6 volts, right? It never goes higher than 12.6 volts, and that you never discharge it past 3 volts per cell, right? So, which is 9 volts for the total pack. So if you try to do that, if you're just a regular user who doesn't know anything about lithium, and you try to use this as is without any kind of battery management system in place, you take it on the ice for your ice flash or whatever it is, and you take it down until it's completely dead. Dead to you means that your device stopped working, right? But dead to the battery, you have no idea what the voltage of the battery is, right? You could have taken it down to 2.5 volts per cell. Who knows, right? But we want to make sure that these cells never go below 3 volts per cell. If it does that, then we get into the dangerous territory where we're doing irreparable damage to the battery, greatly shortening the life of the battery, right? These are expensive batteries. You don't want to do that. On the other end, when you're charging it, again, like I mentioned, you want to make sure that it doesn't charge up past 12.6 volts, right? If you got a lead acid battery charger, you're going to look at 13.5 volts, 14 volts, and that would be fine for lead acid. But for this, you're talking about fire. You're talking about disaster, right? So again, a BMS. So I'll get a BMS to show you one. So here's a BMS. This is the BMS that I'm going to be using. This one I ordered specifically for this project. This is a 25 amp capable BMS, so it'll allow an output of up to 25 amps continuous. It has a higher peak higher peak discharge rating, but 25 amps is well and above what I expect to pull from this pack, right? So just to point out, this one is actually very nicely labeled, and it shows you exactly where everything's going to go. So this one, on the back, you see, well, let's go with the front first. You see the B minus, B1, B plus, and B2. So the B minus is really just the 0 volts. So that's the negative part of the battery, right? The negative most part of the battery. Then the next part, which is on the other side, B1, that's going to be connected to the next leg. So if we're looking at the battery pack, we have negative here is going to be connected to the 0 volts. Then the 3.7, which is B1 on this, is going to be connected to the positive on the next leg of the battery, so that from here to here you're measuring 3.7 volts nominal, right? Then we're going to be going to 7.4 volts, which is B2 on there, and from here to here, which is the other positive side of the next string in series, you're going to be measuring a nominal voltage of 7.4 volts. And then to the outermost positive side, we have what is labeled as B plus, battery plus, which we've labeled here. That's the full voltage of the pack through the entire string, right? And that's 12.6 volts fully charged and 11.1 volts nominal for the pack, right? And so that's how you're going to connect it. And then you have the P minus and P plus, and basically that's your power outputs, right? So that'll be like the positive, negative of the battery output. Okay, so we'll go ahead and connect those. I'll connect some leads to this, and then we'll solder that together. I plan to mount it here. It's perfect size for this. Yeah. So we'll just put that on there once everything's soldered up, and then we'll get this shrink wrapped and nicely packaged. Okay, so I'll get some wire here. If we look at how these connections are physically laid out, we're not going to need very long wire. And basically, we're going from here to here to this pole, from here to that pole, from B2 to this pole, from B plus to the outermost positive, that pole. So they're very, very close. You need very short wire. So let's start with the negative. Don't need very much at all. Normally I'd use wire strippers, but I can't be bothered to find them right now. This is silicone, high heat wiring that I'm using here. So let's just tin these. Let the tip a little bit. Okay, so try to tin this. Okay, we'll use red for the next ones. So we'll go to B1 here. So B1 is going to be, I'm forgetting my flux here. B1 is going to be from negative to the first positive on the first cell. So that's going to give you a nominal voltage of 3.7 volts. Okay. Let's grab the other one. Guys, I apologize, by the way. This is I'm actually this cut here that I'm making. It's a couple days later from the last clip you've seen, and I'm just a little bit more congested. So if I sound off, that's the reason why. So just tin the leads. So now we're going to B2. So from B2,
From the outermost negative to B2, we're measuring a nominal voltage of 7.4 volts. So that's 2 cells in series. Shit, that's hot. Okay. And then we'll go to B plus. And from negative, the outermost negative to the outermost positive, that's the full voltage of the pack. That'll be measuring a nominal voltage of 11.1 volts. Fully charged 12.6. Okay. So we have plenty of space. I'm gonna go ahead and I'm actually, well, maybe I don't have to secure it on here, but yeah, I'll just stretch it out like this. You know what? Give me a second. Okay, so I'm just going to add a little bit of glue and secure this in place. Okay, so that's on there. Don't need this hot glue anymore. Get that out of the way. Okay, so let's go ahead and put that on there. Sorry guys, I'm fumbling around here. Oh, Jesus Christ. This wire gets really hot really quickly. Okay. So now, if I take my voltmeter and if I measure between P minus and P plus on the outputs and inputs of the battery, we should see this, the full voltage of the pack there, which is 11.31 volts, which is good. I'll point out what I was talking about in terms of how this works, right? So from B minus to B1, we should measure the voltage of one single cell, which is nominal 3.7. So you see, I'm not sure if you can see that, 3.75 volts. Okay, so from B1 to B2, now we're measuring two cells in series, and we should see a nominal voltage of about 7.4 volts. So we see 7.53, that's great. And from B1 to B plus, that's now three cells in series, and we should see a nominal voltage of 11.1 volts, 12.6 fully charged, 11.3, and that's great. Okay, so I know I've mentioned that a couple times, but for most people who are doing something like this, the BMS part and the various leads could be a bit overwhelming for some people to understand. It's really quite simple once you understand what the BMS is trying to do, right? And it's just measuring the voltage from each cell, right? Okay, so let's, what are we going to do next? We're going to tape this off. We have some Captain tape here. How do I want to do this? You know what, actually before I do that, let me get what I need for my battery leads. Actually before I do any of that, one thing I do want to have is an external battery monitor for a capacity checker, cell balance checker, whatever you want to call it. But basically it's a device like this and a device like what I showed you in the previous build of my battery pack, where you can monitor the cell voltage from an external device and if necessary balance it. This one actually does balancing. But yeah, we'll just add that so that we have the capability to check, as well as connect this to a standard hobby charger and use the balancing leads here to properly balance charge the pack. Okay, so same concept. We're going to start from battery negative and work our way out. So I want to make these a little longer. So I'll do it towards the end of the pack. Let's reset this. Soldering iron is still heating up. Okay, so we'll now go to the next leg. Okay. So this step really is not necessary, but when you're working with lithium, really it's a good idea to be able to monitor and manage what's going on with that pack, right? So if I connect this now, if everything was done correctly, so we see, stand up for this, I haven't used this one in a while. So you see the total voltage of the pack is 11.32, and so that's saying 1S there, that's the first cell 3.7, second one 3.7, third one 3.7, and again the total 11.32, right? So showing you capacity, currently it's only about 14%. I'm not sure if that's correct. I think this is currently set to lipo chemistry. Let's change that to lithium ion. That's a little bit better. So you got to tell it what type of chemistry you're using. So that's 11.32 is 54% capacity for this pack. And again, the voltages don't change with the chemistry. It's just telling you the high and the low set points for the 3S configuration. Okay, so that's done. Now we're going to tape this off. And so I'm just heating up the hot glue again, and we're gonna do a little bit of cable management, secure these cables in place so that there's no real strain being placed on the solder joints. But while I wait for that to happen, for that to warm up, I have some 10 gauge wire here, which we'll be using for the main connections on the battery input output, and we'll be using an XT30 connector, so that number one, again, I could use it with my hobby charger. That's a common port used, and also it's just a very nice type of plug to use for this sort of thing. So I'll get my helping hands here. And that's the positive side. Okay, get a little bit of flux. Make sure that is the positive. Yeah, that is the positive. Obviously important to get your polarity correct. Okay, so where is my solder? So you want to keep it on there for a little bit, because that is a pretty chunky piece of metal there. You want to make sure you have sufficient heat and enough solder to hold that in there properly. Okay, so that's good. And let's flip that over. It's obviously quite hot. Okay. Now typically when you're soldering, you want to bring the solder, you want to heat the component and then bring the solder to the thing being soldered. You don't typically do what I'm doing here, where you put the solder blob on there and then bring it to it. I know a lot of guys are probably watching that wondering what the hell I'm doing, but don't have enough hands here, and it's late in the day and I just don't care. So that's on there. Has a nice cover for it. Ooh, that's hot. Okay, so we'll let that cool for a second. Get that out of the way. Okay, let's clean that up. Let's tin these leads. In case you're wondering, by the way, while I'm doing this, this mat that I'm using here, the reason why I use this mat, this is just a baking mat for cooking, but it's a silicone mat, and it's obviously withstands very high heats. I'm doing this work in on my kitchen table because I live in a condo and I don't have a garage or a proper workspace, so this allows me to do this sort of soldering without destroying my table, and obviously the wife won't have to kill me, so that's always a good thing. I know a lot of YouTube channels where guys do this sort of work. They'll use a mat with the checkerboard sort of thing. That's it's just a cutting mat, and it's made out of leather, and looks nice and everything, but I find silicone's a lot better for protecting from solder and high heat stuff like that. Okay. These are 10 gauge wires. This is, oh, I need some flex. This is getting a little beefy here, so you need proper heat and a fatter tip to solder this sort of thing. Otherwise, you'll be making a mess of the solder joints. Always pre-tin your leads. Again, I'm not an expert, guys, so just, you know, do your own thing. Alrighty, so that is done, and you can close this up now. Okay, so a nice connection there. I could put even some heat shrink on there, but not really necessary. So if I check the voltage on this, that should give me the full pack voltage. There you go. 11.31 volts. So now we're done. Let's do a bit of cable management here. So these are MOSFETs here. This is what does the switching on the BMS for the power in and the power out. These MOSFETs are typically heat sunk on most BMS boards that you'll find. This one does not seem to be heat sunk, obviously, and that's likely due to the fact that it's fairly low current, 25 amps, so it should be able to handle that with not too much heat. So, but in any case, the only reason why I mentioned that is I'm not going to place wires directly on top of it, just because of the heat that might be generated. So I'm going to put this somewhere over here, just a little bit of a blob. So we're essentially done now. What I've done is I've added some hot glue to kind of add some strain relief for these little connections, the balance leads. And I've also added a zip tie here for this cable because this is a pretty heavy cable and it's kind of long. It would be easy to put a lot of stress on these leads, so just kind of doubled it over like that, and that way there's no stress on the leads there. Okay, so the next step really is just to pretty it up, and well, actually before I do that, kind of tape things up a little bit. I'll use some high heat insulating Kapton tape. Probably do that. Really just concerned about the board here, but it's not really necessary to do that anyway. Okay, so that's all taped up. Last thing to do is just make it look pretty and put it inside some heat shrink. Okay, and we're going to take just a regular old hair dryer, hopefully not wake up my daughter who is sleeping right now. Put this to hot. Okay, that looks somewhat pretty. We'll just a bit of excess. Maybe I want to seal this off a little bit because I am going to be using this out on the ice. So perhaps a couple strips across here would not be a bad idea. Okay guys, so we're done. We have a completed pack. One thing I did go back and do, sorry, I just realized after I put this, I shrink wrapped everything together, I forgot to add this other cable. I wanted to have more than one option for charging. So I have these barrel connectors, which is also what I use in my underwater fishing camera that I did. So it gives me a few more options in terms of what kind of connectors I can use. So there's a female end, there's a male end. I have the XD30 connector, and I have the balance lead, right? So it was no big deal, just solder that onto the outputs and that was it, right? And I just shrink wrapped everything again. So let's talk about charging. How am I gonna charge this battery now, right? So one thing you need to realize is that now we're dealing with lithium. You wanna basically put that lead acid battery charger that came with the Humminbird away and keep it away from this lithium battery unless you want to set your house on fire, right? We do have a BMS inside here that should protect it from over voltage, but do not ever rely on something like that from saving you. Just use a proper charger to begin with, right? So let's talk about charging options. So how can I charge this? I have two options. Number one, I can use the same charger that I used for my solar generator build, which is a purpose-built 12.6 volt lithium ion 3S charger. So this is 5 amps. So I can simply connect it to here. So we don't need to use this while we're charging, but I'm going to connect it anyway so that you can see the voltage. Okay, so that's on. But really all you need is this. And just open up that cover for the thing. That light turns red. When it's done, it'll turn green, indicating that your battery pack should now be at 12.6 volts. So that's currently charging, and I can monitor the voltage from here, or I can just wait for that light to turn green, right? So that's 5 amps charging, which is more than enough for this battery pack. The other thing I could do is use my hobby charger and take advantage of the balance leads that I have here and really properly balance the pack with a dedicated charger that's designed to do that sort of thing, right? So I have a hobby charger. I will connect that here. These are designed for charging like RC batteries for drones and that sort of thing. I'm just powering it with my power supply here. So that turns on, you see an indication, all 3 cells here, probably can't see that, but you see all 3 cells here, 3.85, 3.85, 3.84, right? So pretty well balanced. We can go ahead and set that to LiPo 4.2, that's correct, 3S, that's what we want. And we can do a max current of, we can do more than that, but 5 amps is good. Go ahead, hit start. And away we go. It's going to slowly ramp up until it hits 5 amps. And we're charging. And so while we're charging, you can monitor the cells, right? So this will do a really good job of balancing the pack. And it'll charge a lot better than anything else that you can do, right? So we have a couple options there. So just wanted to cover that. So that's how you charge the pack. So we'll go ahead and stop that. And I guess the only thing left to do is to connect this to the sonar, right? Make sure it fits. So it should be a direct replacement for the housing here for this type of lead acid battery. Again, this is a 7 amp hour lead acid battery, really heavy for what it is. It comes with this foam mat, which is basically just to make sure that it sits nice and snug. So we'll move these cables out of the way. Sorry, fumbling around here. Oh. So nice and snug, see, nice and tight, it'll pick up the unit. So that's not going anywhere. And obviously the only other thing that I had to do was to modify the connector on my Helix 5. So previously I had these ends, which is suitable for the lead acid battery, but we're not going to use it anymore. So I just cut that off and I put an XT30 connector on there, male, so that I can connect my female XT30 connector from this battery pack. We'll do that now. And if all went well, we should be able to power this on. And there you have it. So we have a completed pack, direct replacement for the 7 amp hour battery. So now what we have is a 23 amp hour battery that is, what is it? Hold on. 23 amp hour battery that is 255 watt hours, I believe, if I'm doing the math correctly, which is a huge improvement over this piece of crap that is really heavy. 7 amp hours, I could probably only squeeze 3 amp hours out of that. This is now 23 amp hours, all of which is usable. And I could probably be on the ice for multiple days, 3-4 days probably, without even having to charge, like full 8-hour days of fishing, right? So huge improvement. So that's pretty much it for this project. I hope you guys liked the video. If you do, please like and subscribe. The likes really help the channel quite a bit. And also, if you want to help fund any future projects, we have links in the description with PayPal and crypto links. Any monetary donations are greatly appreciated and definitely help with future builds. You guys have any ideas of what you want to see in a future build, please by all means leave your comments and suggestions. See you guys next time. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.